Hey there, friends. It's good to see you again today. We have a lot of things to talk about because all of the things coming up are Valentine's Day, and it's still Black History Month, and we are still going to be reading stories that are by Black authors. And then, before we all come back together again, it's going to be Ash Wednesday, and that's the beginning of Lent. So we're going to talk about all of those things today. So the very first thing, remember I have my pink candle because I thought it would be fun to have a pink candle for this month. And we're going to start by lighting our candle. There it goes. And we are reminded all the time that Jesus and God are with us, even in the very dark places in our lives. So now, as we have our candle going, let's talk about Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day is February 14th. And what I said last week was that I was going to do a little bit of research and I was going to tell you a few interesting tidbits of information about Valentine's Day. So here, I actually learned a lot of things. But the coolest thing that I learned is that there wasn't just one Saint Valentine. There were lots of people who had the name of Saint Valentine. And it's because in Latin, the word Valentine meant worthy or strong or powerful. So lots of people actually liked that name. And Valentine's Day in the United States is February 14th. But there are other Valentine's Days in other parts of the world that happen on different days of the year. So you could hop around the world and you could celebrate Valentine's Day in all different places. Kind of cool, right? Now, I think because Valentine's Day is coming up, it would be cool if we do something for someone else. And I bet you've got some ideas as families of things that you can do for other people. Remember last week we had the little mason jar and it had all of the different pieces of paper in it, and you could pick something every day that would make somebody feel special to do something that they wanted to do. Well, today, here's another idea. I went ahead and I used one of my hearts that I cut out last week, and I made a little note on it. And this note is going to be for my mail carrier. And so on my heart, I wrote, "Thank you for delivering our mail, especially when it is so cold outside." Because right now, those mail carriers are driving around in a truck that part of the side, if you've looked at a mail truck, is completely open. And it's 0 degrees outside. It's freezing. So think of how hard they're having to work. And I think that we need to make sure that they know we appreciate them. So I've got my heart that I wrote on, and I'm going to fold it up and put it in this little envelope. And my envelope says, "Thank you, mail carrier." And then for me, I have these little Kit Kats, and I'm going to tape my Kit Kat on the side of that. And then I'm going to stick it in my mailbox so that when that person comes to deliver my mail, then they'll find this as a little surprise for themselves. So you can do lots of different things for your mail carrier, but that's just one idea. And if there are other special people that you want to reach out to, maybe if you have food delivered, like your DoorDash person, if you have groceries delivered, all of those people I think would really love to get some sort of a little Valentine to just let them know that we appreciate the fact that they are out and about in this cold weather. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to read our story. And the fun thing is, our story is called The Case for Loving. And I chose this because it was Valentine week. But what we're going to learn in our story is that loving is actually these people's last name. And this is a true story about their life. So let's listen to our story. The Case for Loving by Selena Alco, and it's illustrated by Sean Qualls. First comes love, then comes marriage. Donald, Peggy, and Sydney had two parents who loved them and who loved each other. In fact, from almost the moment Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, they wanted to get married and have a family. But for them, it wasn't that simple. And here's why. Richard was white, a fair-skinned boy who got quickly sunburned in July. Mildred was what they called colored in those days. Her skin was creamy caramel. In 1958, they lived in the small town of Central Point, Virginia, where people every shade from the color of chamomile tea to summer midnight had made their homes. Richard Loving was a tall, quiet man of English and Irish descent. The person he loved most was Mildred Jeter. Mildred was part African American and part American Indian, and she was thin as a rail. That's how she got her nickname String Bean. When Richard popped the question, String Bean jumped with joy. The two were in love. They felt it should be their right to get married. Sadly, it was not. In Virginia, or 16 other states, in those places, marriage between people of different races was against the law. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. Even after slavery ended, some white people weren't used to blacks being free, let alone free to marry whom they choose. If you married someone who had skin color unlike yours, you could go to jail. Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but they did not want to spend any time in prison. Although they couldn't have a legal marriage in Virginia, they could right next door in Washington, D.C. So they invited a few friends and family to witness their wedding across state lines. At the ceremony, nobody objected when Richard said, "I do," and Mildred said, "I do too." The Lovings were officially pronounced husband and wife. The blushing bride and her groom smiled all the way from Washington, D.C. back to their house in Virginia. They couldn't wait to start a family. But soon, something terrible happened. In the middle of the night, they were awoken from their sleep. It was the police. An officer shouted at Richard, "What are you doing with that woman?" Richard proudly pointed to their marriage certificate hanging on the wall. "That's not good here," the policeman boomed. And just like that, Mildred and Richard were taken away and locked up in jail. They were charged with unlawful cohabitation, which means living together against the law. The Lovings didn't think there was anything unlawful about their love at all. If anything, the way they were treated should have been unlawful. It was just awful. After a few nights behind bars, Richard and Mildred were told they had to leave Virginia if they wanted to live together as Mr. and Mrs. Loving. So, with heavy hearts, the pair hugged their families, packed their bags, and left their home. They tried to make a life for themselves in D.C. Richard found a job laying bricks, and String Bean gave birth to 3 babies, 3 different shades of milk chocolate brown. But the city didn't suit the Lovings. There were too many cars. There was too much concrete. They missed Central Point with its rolling hills and open spaces. They missed their friends and families. They missed their home. They wanted to return to Virginia for good, so they hired lawyers to help them fight for what was right. By now, it was 1966, and the times they were a-changin'. Brand new ideas like equal rights for people of all colors were replacing old, fearful ways of thinking. The lawyers worked around the clock to make the case for interracial marriage as strong as possible. It was time to take the loving case all the way to the Supreme Court. On June 12, 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began, Richard and Mildred stayed at home with Donald, Peggy, and Sidney. They were all nervous and afraid they would not win. The state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Then it was the Loving's lawyers' turn to present their case. They said it was unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race, and they read a message from Richard himself. Tell the court I love my wife, and it is just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia. It didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings. Interracial couples could now legally marry in Virginia. Richard and Mildred hugged. They won the right to their love. They were free at last. Over 9 years after their arrest, the Lovings packed their bags one final time. Richard planned to build a big, roomy brick house in Central Point. String Bean was ready to start their life over. The Loving family returned to Virginia to live happily and legally ever after. Wasn't that a great story? Isn't it crazy to think that really not that long ago, it wasn't even legal in some places in our country for people who were from different races to be married? I am so grateful that those things have changed over the last several years. Now, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about Ash Wednesday and Lent. So let's take a look at our bucket that I have here. Now, all of our families should get a bucket like this sometime before Ash Wednesday, which is February 17th. Now, I need to tell you something super important about your bucket, so please listen carefully. There's something special in here that is alive and needs to be planted. And it's very cold outside. So if somebody from church comes to your house and rings the doorbell and wants to give you their bucket, please get your bucket inside as quickly as you can so that the things that I'm going to show you don't freeze. Okay? So now, let's take a look at what we've got, shall we? First of all, your bucket is going to be tied with some sort of a ribbon and a knot. So you probably need some scissors to open it up. So I'm doing that. And then there is a little card like this. And it's important to look at the back of the card because the back of the card says growing paperweights. And it's going to give you a whole bunch of instructions about what to do with some of the things in our bag. So let's continue to look. First, I found some fruit snacks, and they're Valentine's Day fruit snacks. So that's pretty fun. They're all hearts. Then I found some foamy stickers, and these you can use to decorate the outside of your bucket, okay? Then there's this cool plastic case, and it has a whole bunch of cards inside. So we'll look at the cards in just a second too, okay? A whole bunch of candles. What on earth do you think we're going to do with these candles? I'll show you that in a minute too. And then, look at, there's dirt. And look at these guys. These are paper whites. And they are a bulb that you're gonna plant using your directions in your dirt. And they are gonna grow and bloom. And what I want us to remember with our paper whites here is that something like this that looks, if you look at it this way without looking at the stuff up here, it looks a little bit dead and a little bit all shriveled up. And then we put it in the dirt and it's going to, all of these sprouts are going to shoot up towards the sun. And down here, you can kind of see where this is where the roots are going to grow from, okay? And then you will have something beautiful that blooms in your house that will remind you of spring. The other thing that I like about things like this is it also reminds us of Jesus. Because after Jesus died, Jesus was put into a very dark place, kind of like when we plant something in dirt. And then, after a while, after 3 days, Jesus came out of that darkness and looked like something completely different, had a completely different form. And that will be like these, how they look one way right now. And then when they bloom, they will have a completely different form and they will look beautiful in an entirely different way. So that's going to be something that is super, super fun for us to experience together, because I'll check in on the ones that I have at home and we'll see how they're growing. So I'm going to stick these back in our bucket. And then I am going to get out my plastic case with the cards that say Lenten Blessings. And we're going to take a look at this, okay? So there are 40 cards in here because there are 40 days of Lent. And there's something that you can choose to do every day as a family. But you know what? If you don't do every single thing, that's okay too. I think it's just important to take the time to think about how we are trying to be as much like Jesus as possible. And Lent is a great time for us to do that. Now, the first day of Lent is Ash Wednesday. And so there's a card in here. And in our Ash Wednesday card, it's going to tell us to try to find your Christ candle from your Advent wreath. So remember back at Christmas time, we had all of our Advent candles, and one of them was the white Christ candle. And it would be super cool if you and your parents can try to find where that is. But if you can't, you can use any other candle as well. So maybe pause and try to find that candle. And I'm going to do the same thing, okay? I'll be right back. Okay, so here's what I remembered when I went looking for my candle. After I filmed all of our Sunday school lessons at Advent, I gave that set to a friend of mine so that they could have their own Advent wreath in their house as well. So if you can't find yours, just like I know I don't have mine anymore, you can grab any candle. So I grabbed this one, and this is going to be my Christ candle. And then you can line up your other tea lights. I have to make room here. You can line them up any way you want. I'm going to do 4 on one side of my Christ candle, and I'm going to do 4 on the other side of my Christ candle. And this is something that you can do with your family on Ash Wednesday, which is February 17th. We already talked about that. But anyway, so we've got our Christ candle, and I have 4 little votives on either side. Okay? Now, what my card says is it says meditate. So it says, using the Christ candle from your Advent wreath, pinch the ash off the wick. So here is my wick in my Christ candle. And I'm just gonna pinch a little bit, and hopefully your candle actually has been burned before. And that way you'll get some stuff. I don't know if you can see this on my finger, but it's kind of black ash stuff. Okay? And that's what we want. And then you're gonna draw with this ash a little cross on your forehead and on everybody else's forehead that's with you. Because it's not Ash Wednesday, I'm not gonna actually do it, but I'll do it on my hand so you can see what it looks like, okay? So once you've done that, then we're going to read this meditation together, okay? And it says, during Lent, we remember that Christ lived and Christ died. So will we. Christ lived to sow seeds of love and justice in the name of God. And so should we. And then your instructions are going to tell you to light all of your candles. And that helps us remember just how bright the light of Jesus was when he was in his ministry. And then there's a verse to read, and then there's a blessing for you at the very end. So I encourage all of you to do this as a family, and then maybe do it either right before or right after you watch our Ash Wednesday service that is going to be at 7 o'clock on Ash Wednesday in the evening. Okay? So that is a lot of things that we have covered today. Why don't we say a prayer? Dear God, during Lent, we are always reminded that our job is to look at the ministry that you did when you were here on earth and try to be as much like that as possible. In your name we pray. Amen. Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.